Thanks all for tuning in to Liberty City Legacies. It is a panel hosted by Third Horizon and O Cinema during this Sundance Film Festival 2021. I'm your moderator, Nadege Green. Sure, Jason filled you all in a little. So we're going to jump into one of my absolute favorite topics, which is discussing one of my favorite places in Miami and a favorite place of storytelling for many of the folks, for all of the folks here tonight who are part of this panel. And so we're going to start with quick intros and bios. First, we have Tarell Alvin McCraney, the Tarell Alvin McCraney, Oscar-winning screenwriter, playwright, and actor, born and raised in the county of Dade, Liberty City, Miami. His autobiographical play in Moonlight, Black Boys Look Blue, was adapted into Moonlight, the movie, and is the recipient of the awards of the Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Picture at the 2017 Academy Awards. He is the chair of playwriting at the Yale School of Drama, a recipient of the MacArthur Fellowship, and a member of the Steppenwolf Theater Ensemble. He is a creator of the television drama David Makes Man, which currently airs on OWN, streams on HBO Max, and was a recipient of a 2020 Peabody Award. Our next panelist is Faren Humes. Faren Humes is a filmmaker from Miami, Florida. Her latest work, Liberty, focused on Miami's Liberty Square housing complex and was a jury award winner for Best Short. She was a Best Short at the Berlinale Generation 14 Plus, SXSW, and Miami Film Festival, and is currently being developed as a feature film. She's the recipient of the Sundance Institute Night Fellowship, Film Independent Project, Involved Directing Fellowship 2018, Borscht Fellowship 2018. Faren was named one of Miami's top 100 creatives by Miami New Times and one of the 25 new faces of independent film by Filmmaker magazine in 2019. And last, but certainly not least, is Katja Esson. Katja Esson is a German-American filmmaker based here in Miami, Florida. She was born and raised in Germany. Her documentary, Fairy Tales, received an Academy Award nomination for Best Documentary Short Subject in 2004. She is the only woman German filmmaker ever nominated for a documentary at the Academy Awards. Her upcoming feature documentary is set in Liberty City. It is called Razing Liberty Square, and it addresses issues around development, decline, disinvestment of a neighborhood, and the redevelopment of one of the oldest federal housing projects in the country. And so those are our panelists for this evening.
Logging. Logging. Milagros.
You still dancing with me tomorrow?
You could go.
This is it, the exact spot. And my brother was taller than I. Here it is, and it's like at my waist. And imagine he was like a 6-footer and it hit him at his shoulder. Yeah. So you imagine how much higher it was. Right here, this is my house where I grew up, 1209 Northwest 64th Street. That was my bedroom window right there. There was a tree. Mom always planted, all of this was trees, and she always planted trees and flowers wherever she was. The whole life right here. And it's gonna be very different. Nothing is gonna be the same.
Everybody has to choose, Day. You gotta choose or you drown. Once you make a choice, Day, you gotta believe it. And even get others to believe it. You can't fool everybody. This life is a choice.
When the lights go out, it's a waiting game.
I see before me the future leaders of this planet that is in desperate need of courageous voices.
You looking at it? Why you stopping, Day?
I can't do this anymore. I need a way out.
I come from the hood.
I come from water. I come from runners. I come from laughter. You keep trying to track it down. That moment, the minute, the second that everything changed.
Sing to the moon and the stars will shine over you. Heaven's gonna turn the tide.
We'll now transition into our discussion with these dope filmmakers for whom you've just seen some of the clips of their work.
Hi, Nadege.
Hi, Faren. Hey, Katja. Hi, Tarell. So let's just jump straight in. Faren, let's start with you. You know, your short film, Liberty, was one of the most awarded short films of 2019. Can you talk a little bit about creating and collaborating with the residents in Liberty City and why, after you chose to now develop it as a feature length?
Well, I'll start with, I guess, the what compelled me to do the story, and that sort of leads its way into the approach and how I collaborated with the residents. But, you know, initially it started really out of just like plain curiosity, maybe even like a little naivete. I was in Liberty Square doing location management for Moonlight when the city announced that they were going to reconstruct the buildings, Liberty Square, in phases. And the curiosity just came in of me just having the notion and belief of like, well, the city and the county, historically, it's with this community, it's always been a bit, not so much advocacy. So with the campaign that rolled out, with the reconstruction, I was suspicious, really. And I just assumed, even though the county was saying, you know, we are going to preserve the families and make sure that everyone is moved out in phases, and everyone that is, all the residents that are currently here, they can remain here. I wasn't I was very wary of it. And so
we've seen before, right? The displacement of Black folks in Liberty City before.
Right, precisely. So I approached the short, well, first it was a feature concept that I came up with first and adapted it to the short. But it was really about me feeling like, even though the county said that this community would remain intact, just feeling like it wasn't. And, I was seeing it before my eyes, 2015, 2016, 2017, residents slowly trickling out. And so the story that came to me was really about spending as much time as I could with the residents that were there. And it really sort of informed the story that I came up with, because I felt a precedent to center the community itself, as opposed to making a completely different imaginative story, completely of my own authorship. I really wanted to find a balance of picking a narrative that would really focus on giving the community time and focusing on the bonds. I wanted to try and materialize the sense of community, try and materialize a sense of loyalty and bondship, despite all of the splitting up that I was witnessing. And so the way that I thought to do that was collaborating with the residents as much as possible. And so that sort of just filtered or infiltrated throughout the entire filmmaking process, that led me to work with Tracy Young Byron and her dance troupe YCDT, because a lot of her dancers are from the West and from the Liberty
Northwestern Senior High School.
Northwestern, right. And it was important for me to cast all of the actors, most of the actors from Liberty Square. And not just cast them, but also, have them own it, give it to them. I always write a script, but it doesn't make it on set. So it was really me just trying to have a back and forth with them about some of the themes that I was talking about with the story, the love and bond, and really just trying to make a set and a space that would lend itself to improvisation and sort of, an authorship created by the residents. And that's what happened. A lot of the film was more so it's just 4 or 5 scenes. And it's really just, the camera situates itself in the scene, and we sort of like forget about ourselves, or become this sort of observer stance as much as we can, to let the residents take it away as best as they can.
I would love to transition to Katja here, because I think it's really interesting when you talk about collaborating with the community and what you just said on love and bond, right? That this is a story that lives here, and you capture that so beautifully. And Katja, you're also documenting Liberty Square in a very different way, where you're going out and you're talking to the residents who live there for the work that you're working on. Can you speak to what drew you to this story? And Faren is based here and is from here. And if you could talk a bit about like coming in from the outside to tell the story in Liberty City.
Yeah, thanks, Nadege. I was born and raised in Germany, but I grew up as an artist and filmmaker here in Miami. I came here very young in '87 to study film and theater. And my very first job in the film industry was a PA at Two Live Crew's music videos that were filmed in Liberty City. So at that time in the late 80s, I knew about Liberty City, but I did not know any of its history. And then I went to New York in the mid 90s, and I moved back to Miami in 2016, which coincided with Moonlight, a film that still affects and inspires me deeply. I then also learned about the city's plan to raise the entire Liberty Square to the ground and to replace it with a new community. And Liberty Square not only being the location of Moonlight, but Nadege, as you said, one of the oldest segregated public housing projects in the country. I mean, really historical, built in the 30s during the New Deal. So I came from a completely different place than Faren. My interest at first was historical. I began to research and then discovered, for me, for example, the remnants of a 6-foot tall segregation wall that you saw in the clip. Then I discovered, for me, also the Hampton, the newly restored Hampton House at that time, the location for One Night in Miami now. And I was embarrassed that I did not know any of these things when I lived in Miami before, and that I hardly knew any of the Black history of Miami. So I kept researching and reconnecting and connecting with more and more community members that I would love to give a little shout out, because I think they might be listening, people like community leaders like Dr. Pinkney, Marshall Davis, Broadway Harewood, or elders like Anna Williams, who was in the clip, Melba Rose, and the Walkers, who took me under their wing and really guided me regarding the history, and not only the history, but also the current situation in Liberty Square and Liberty City. And then I met activists like Valencia Ganda or Trinice Bryant, who then educated me about the fact that Liberty City sits on a ridge. So while Miami Beach will be underwater pretty soon because of sea level rise, Liberty City is on high ground. And this elevation is the reason for much of this investment frenzy and resulting danger of displacement that's happening in Liberty City. And that's climate gentrification, which I had never heard before, this expression. So, then our film, Razing Liberty Square, turned then into much more than just a historical piece where we're trying to intersect structural racism with the housing crisis, with the climate crisis in Miami, and how I am navigating. Thanks for asking that as well. As such an outsider to the culture and the country, I'm in it, but not of it, which gives me a different perspective. So for me, trust is the basis of my filmmaking, and trust comes from investing time and showing up. And people see that. They see that I and our team put in the time and the effort. We have been now filming for about 4 years, really documenting every step of the demolition, construction, everything. I mean, trying to capture really everything that's going on. I live basically not down the road, but I live like 15 minutes away from Liberty Square, and all our production team is Miami based. For example, our DP Hector David Rosales, our Miami producer Ronald Baez, composer Shannon C is even from Liberty City. And although I do have deep connections and relationships now, but it was not like that from the beginning. Of course, people confronted me and wanted to know what the hell I'm doing there and what my intentions were. And I had to explain. And sometimes it was tough, but I came back. And I came back often not to film, but to give space, to wait until people are ready to tell their own stories. So yeah, I'm creating a vehicle, and but the people create the story.
Lovely. And for you, Tarell, I think for many folks outside of Miami, their very first introduction to Liberty City was through Moonlight, right? That you literally put Miami like on another level for folks to see Liberty City through your eyes for the first time. And then even now through the work that you're doing with David Makes Man, you're continuing to explore like the emotional like landscapes and complexity of Black folks in Miami and bringing that to the screen. Can you say like what that experience has been like for you being, you know, a child of Liberty City and to be able to bring these stories in the way that you have?
Well, first, I just want to big up all the work that Faren and Katja are doing. I saw Faren's short at, was it Austin? In Austin, the first time. And I was just sitting, I mean, I was sitting next to this white lady, and I know she thought I was crazy because I was just like beaming and like snapping my fingers and just, you know, not because you couldn't help it. You hear the cadence of those girls. They sound like my mother. They sound like my sister. They sound like me sometimes, you know, and it's just being able to be out in the world and knowing that like those stories of these young women are still, you know, that shot, that beautiful shot of that young woman waiting for a bus, you know, when I was teaching at African Heritage 2 summers ago, you know, it reminds me of like watching my students who were all girls wait for the bus and the kind of like, you just don't know what that's like, both the kind of freedom, the independence that they feel, but also like the terror you feel for them because you know what happens when those cars come by and what they say to those girls sometimes. And so for Faren to like capture that was really gorgeous and beautiful. And I think, you know, Katja is doing a really amazing job of connecting to our elders, you know, the ones who get really pissed off when you call it the poking beans, right? And even though I grew up with my mother and her. In fact, I remember my aunt who just passed away in May from COVID was trying to get Faren to let her be in Moonlight. She was like, "I'm Tarell's aunt. I should be in Moonlight." I was like, "Yo, can you stop aggravating this lady? That's not her. It's not your job. It's not her job." But the you know, just the voice of those elders who, you know, generationally know Liberty City and Liberty Square by different names, in different ways, is gonna be a treasure for all of us, right? It'll be something that we can hold on to and pass down to our children to be able to say, you know, this woman who worked with 2 Live Crew, filming, you know, the No Good But So Good boys in the African Square amphitheater, also is filming a history that's deep and rich. And I think that's what it's been like for me. I mean, David Makes Man takes place in Homestead. I lived in Homestead for like 4 years in another projects. And then Hurricane Andrew brought us right back to Liberty Square. But that feeling, to be able to go out in the world and know that other people are keeping the lights on, and keeping the voices of people from Liberty City, Liberty Square, and Miami. Let's just face it, Black Miami in the conversation is, you know, that's the thrilling part. It's really thrilling, and I however we can make that, however I can help that, I always want to, because it's so. Moonlight should not have been the first time people have heard about Liberty Square. I'm glad that people were introduced, but Barry says this all the time. It's really odd being the first, especially in 2016, when there's so much history. I mean, I'm 3rd generation Miami. You know, my dad grew up in Liberty. I was literally born in Jackson Memorial Hospital, right? You know what I mean? Like, there's no, and we have heads of ballet companies, we have jazz artists, we have more football players and basketball players than we can count. We have singers and songwriters, we have artists, we have construction workers and engineers. And like, so there should not be this way that the first time you heard about Liberty Square was on First 48. And I think the people in this panel are helping change that.
You know, it's interesting because I'm also born and raised in Miami, went to high school in Liberty City, proud Miami Northwestern Bull, because this is what we do when we go out. But Tarell knows this. But like to what Katja said about, you know, not knowing Black Miami's history, right? That that so much of the history around Black folks in Miami is erased. And I'm sure you probably experienced this when you got into the world, Tarell, where people be like, oh, y'all got Black people in Miami? Or, right, like this is a real question. Like, y'all got real Black neighborhoods in Miami? Like, it's not just a tourist paradise?
Like the fact that the charter that incorporates Miami in 1896 is signed by the Negroes who were in the pool hall down the way, because Julia Tuttle needed 16 male citizens to sign it, I think it was. I might be messing up the number, but there are Negroes on the charter for the city, literally.
Black folks literally founded city of Miami, and Black folks literally built Miami. I mean, from like literally clearing the swamp and the mangroves in order to build what we know as the infrastructure of Miami-Dade, the Florida East Coast Railroad, all of that, Black folks built that Miami is built on Black labor, Black Bahamian labor in particular, and Black labor of folks from, the Carolinas and the South who migrated down here. But so much of that history is untold and is unexplored. And I think by design erased, because to talk about Blackness in Miami would mean you also have to talk about white terrorism in Miami. And that is also to talk about the truth of who we are, and the stories of inequality, but also of resilience and resistance and joy, which is what I loved about both Faren's film. It's like you saw the joy, right? You saw that, like, what Black girl getting her hair braided? Like, you just smile. Like, I smiled throughout your whole short. It's just because it was me. I was like, that's me when I had hair. But like, I just want y'all to, if you could just reflect on like the art of storytelling, especially like the art of storytelling in a neighborhood like Liberty City, right? Neighborhoods, and there's a Liberty City in a lot of other places, right? Like neighborhoods for whom the adjective that precedes it is often crime ridden or, down and out, or, the adjectives are always something negative, right? That precedes the name of this neighborhood. Can you talk about like storytelling from the perspective of really capturing the fullness and nuances in communities that typically are not captured in that way? And what is the responsibility to tell the story fully? Yeah, whoever wants to take it. I mean, this is for all of you, so please.
Well, I think it comes with a perspective. You have to want to see that, or want to see the community fully. But thinking about the beings at Liberty Square, it's, despite the fact that, this is a public housing community that is inherently, there's like inherent transience in terms of people that are coming and going and, moving out, moving in all the time. There's still such a, it's a community, it's a tight community. And there are established networks and support systems there. And those are some of the nuances that I wanted to get to that I don't see on the news, that we don't hear in the midst of the Reconstruction campaign, or if it's about a shooting, a fatal shooting that happens. Like, I never hear about how interlocked the community is, and that's one of the most prominent things that I incur when I'm there. And that, also because it's the oldest housing project in Miami, so it's layers to it. It extends throughout. Like, I would be hard pressed to find someone. I say this all the time. Like, if you're not from Liberty Square, there's somebody that you know from it, or in a neighboring community. So I always see Liberty Square as like one of the mother vines that extends out to, if not Little Haiti, then Carroll City, and then we're seeing the second and third wave of that now, Miramar and Pembroke Pines. But Overtown and Liberty Square, I've always seen that as some of the core mother vines of Black Miami, and you feel that when you go into these neighborhoods and you talk to residents who talk about other residents. It's not, even though these are separate families, it is and sort of conjoining that happens. And that's really what, that's to your question, that's what I see, and I wanted to sort of bring to the fore the mother vine effect, I'll call it.
What about you, Katja?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what Tarell and what all of you said, and which was for me also a complete, I mean, part of my discovery of Black Miami's history, that Miami was founded by Black Bahamians, and that you know, when I mean, I think people generally talk about Miami, oh, it's such a transient city, nobody has any roots there, nobody stays there, everybody's going back to Cuba, or you know, whatever, or once dreams of going back to Cuba. And that was my impression too, that there are no roots. And then I saw, you know, 4 generations, you know, like the ancestors of the founders living in Liberty City, deep roots. So Liberty City always feels a little bit like an island in Miami. And also this is something that I feel, I mean, I'm talking about it, I'm getting goosebumps. I feel that so strong. And what Faren said, these invisible connections. And, you know, I'm going crazy in my film with the old laundry lines. I think, Faren, I told you that also, right? These old laundry lines as a symbol of these connections, you know, between people. And and I feel from this deep roots that they are in Liberty City. And from that comes so much power and strength. And that is what we want to show in our film, you know, strength and empowerment, and the opposite of pity and poverty porn. I mean, that was like some of stuff that Jason, you know, gave us here. But yeah, the absolute opposite of that. And in terms of responsibility, we went very early on to the Southern Dock Fund artist convening, and the motto there was nothing about us without us. And that resonated so deeply with me. I mean, I know it, but I never have been really challenged that much before to incorporate that into my filmmaking practice. So the protagonists, the teams, the vendors, you know, really look for that collaboration of people that are from here, you know. But the biggest responsibility is just to get the story right, not to repeat the common mainstream narrative. On the contrary, you know, create the platform so people can share the stories that they want to share, that they want to tell us.
And Tarell, did you want to weigh in on that, like the responsibility part, right, to capture the fullness of our being?
I mean, the good news is learning how to be an artist in Liberty Square, Liberty City, particularly at African Heritage all those years. What you do learn is that no story gets all of it, right? Like, that's why we have stories, it's just parts of just having a real urge and need to come back home, because we have such a brain drain, particularly in the Black community. You know, if we're taught very early, if you're talented, get the hell out of here, go somewhere else to be recognized. My grandmother was born in Coconut Grove in 1926 to Bahamian immigrant parents. And the minute she got her education, they were like, you're going to school in New York or Delaware. You're not staying here. And so thank God she came back. Thank God. And so it's really personal for me, actually. I don't know that I have any, you know, any rubric other than like I want to make sure that the young women in my community are equipped with all the resources they can. It's why, you know, we started these programs to make sure that they like know how to, you know, if someone says, oh, well, you've never written a play before, and just make sure that they do get all the opportunities that I was afforded when I was 13 or 14 to write a play, to be in a play, to produce a play, to produce a film, to write a film, so that nobody can tell them like, oh, well, you haven't done. It's actually, no, they've done 2 or 3 by the time they get to you. and that they should be able to, like Katja is saying, author their own voices and their own stories, right? And I just felt like it was when you, again, when you're the first, quote unquote, people like to be like, yeah, cool, we got one, right? Mm-hmm. We got that one Black story out of Liberty City that we need. And that drove me crazy. I was like, are you kidding me? There's so many aspects of this. Just across the street from Liberty Square, the Randolphs lived, and like that, and their story is so different than the story of, you know, my story. Then, you know what I mean? Like Catty Corner is Holmes. And if you go down the street, Martin Luther King burned down, and what that did in the displacement of the students who had to go throughout the community to go to school, and how that, I mean, there's just so many aspects of the community that need, and I think I love, I know I love this idea of the mother thread, or the mother vine, that Faren brought up, but that Katja echoed. Because once you start talking about Liberty Square, you also start talking about West Grove. You also start talking about Ghouls, which everybody forgets about. You also start talking about Perrine and West Perrine. You start talking about Naranja. You start talking about, you know, Miami Gardens, Carroll City, Opelika. Like, these are the places where Black culture has sort of, you know, has grown, and sort of Richmond Heights, how that was started by World War II vets, Black World War II vets, and maintained its Blackness and its middle classness, even in the face of growing gentrification around it. Like, those stories are there and must be told, because if we don't tell them, they will say we never existed.
They will say we never existed, indeed. And that's a great segue to one of the questions in the chat is asking if folks have read The Miami Times and the Fight for Equality, Race, Sport, and the Black Press by Dr. Yanela McFloyd. She is a professor at FAMU, and she wrote a piece, like I've read it. She wrote a book on the history of the Miami Times, and like she had access to the archives dating back to 1937. Actually, on my Black Miami-Dade archival Instagram page, I'm doing a series right now based off of her book on the history of Miami Times for Black History Month. Well, Black Miami-Dade is Black History year round, but the history of the Miami Times, especially Black press, she goes into the reality that at the time, the Miami Herald or the Miami Daily News was not covering the Black community in any kind of meaningful way, unless it was on fire or people were fighting or getting shot. But, you know, in the Miami Times is where you went for birth announcements. It's where you went for wedding announcements. It's where you found out when Cab Calloway was performing at the Sir John, or where you found out if Lena Horne is coming to town. It's where you found out, like, you know, so-and-so is going off to college, let's send them off as a community with love. Like, that's where the prayer circles were. And I always joke, like, are you even from Miami if you don't have an obituary in the Miami Times? Like, did you, like you need, like, that just makes you official. Like, you know, I'm telling the truth, y'all. But no, that was a beautiful, it is a great book. It's an academic book. Like, it's not readily available, like in all the places, but it talks about Miami Times, and not just as like a newspaper that documented stuff, but as active participants in fighting for civil rights in Miami-Dade County, including the desegregation of the parks, and taking one of their cases went all the way up to the Supreme Court, where Black golfers had to fight in order to get access to the golf facilities in Miami Springs, because they would only give Black folks one day a week, even though you had folks like Althea Gibson and Jackie Robinson coming here in Miami for one of the biggest, largest Black golf tournaments in the US. So that's like a synopsis of the book. Y'all check that out if you can find it. The next chat question is, please talk about how you chose the appropriate platform to share your stories, i.e. documentary, narrative, TV series, podcast, interactive, etc. How did you guys decide how to share your story? If one or two people want to take it, if we want to get to, there's only 3 questions in the chat, so I think we should be able to get to all of them so far. Anyone?
Well, for me, the format, since I'm a documentary filmmaker, it was clear documentary. The question then over the last 4 years has become who can be our partners? How can we, we're planning an extensive impact campaign that will hopefully run for a couple of years with the film. So who are the partners who can bring this film into the living rooms of the people that we wanted to see? And we're really, in our case, we were super lucky that, for example, PBS, Black Public Media came on board. So hopefully that's the route we definitely want to go. And yeah.
Y'all gonna hear a couple of squeaks from my dog. Apologies. Well, for me, again, it's like Liberty Square. I'm trying to. It was like a matter of preservation and trying to record a community that is changing so quickly. So that informed the process, just in terms of I wanted to do improvisation. I wanted to work with the residents or as many people from Liberty City as possible to have it inform it, to, as y'all said, to lend this authorship to it. And I mean, yeah, the beans is lit. Like there's the stories, they're there. It's not the way I see it when I go there. It's more so, again, I'm echoing, like lending a platform and coming up with themes to sort of, just like provide a slight platform to bounce off of.
Tarell, did you want to take that one as well?
Yeah, mine is easy. I had the great fortune of growing up doing like that, knowing that you could be an artist, because I had examples of that, and thank God for the African Heritage Cultural Arts Center. Thank God for PAVAC. Thank God for magnet programs that just allowed me to believe that I could be an artist, even from a dumb young age. I was still popping to the Northwestern Band, but I also was going, making sure that I learned monologue structure and stuff. So it was, I just think that my job is to make sure I'm paying it forward, making sure that the students who are, there so many resources are underfunded, so many institutions are, disappearing, that I have to just make sure that those students, for instance, Charles R. Drew had a magnet program for the arts, both in the elementary and in the middle school at one point in time, and now they don't, right? And so how do we make sure that kind of education that was free and public, it remains? So anyway, but yeah, I just was always taught that art was my way to storytell. This kind of art was my way to storytell, and I did it. Some people don't like it. Some people think I'm bad at it, but I continue doing it anyway.
And for the record, no matter what, when that beat drops, you must pop. Okay?
Yeah,
that's just how we do.
That's why Trick said, we're gonna let the band handle this.
Listen, right. The Miami just jumped out, y'all.
Can I add something? Because I totally blanked out on something super important, because this is new to me, that when we collected oral histories from the elders, it was clear that not all of it could be in the documentary. So then we started thinking, what do we do apart from giving it to an archive like in the Hampton House or Black archives in Overtown, and then we came up with this idea to create a VR, a virtual reality piece that goes with our impact campaign. And Faren knows that, because I've been trying to get her into that, and Tarell knows. Well, anyhow, you both know that I've been anyhow. So we're doing actually a VR piece that brings us to Liberty Square in the 40s, and to the Hampton House in the 60s, and the pit in the 80s. So all animated and drawn and guided by a character that's loosely based on Dr. Pinkney, but combines all the elders. So that is totally new for me. And it is amazing. We're working with a lot of the elders, we collected their stories, Marshall Davis is an advisor, also like a lot of elders. So that is something that's also happening at the same time. But right now they're actually programming and coding. So this is so far from what I do that I'm like, okay, let's, once I see something, then I can, but right now it's all the technical stuff. So that's another platform for me.
I can squeeze in just thank you for sharing that. I can't wait to see what that looks like.
I know, I forgot that. Sorry for everybody's listening.
From Corey, the amazing Corey from Maven Leadership Collective, Black Queer Folks Stand Up. Can anyone share what getting funding for narratives that run counter to the dominant narratives that don't accurately reflect the reality discussed here? So what does funding look like when you're trying to make something that doesn't, flow through the dominant narrative of what these neighborhoods are?
It looks like this, like a bob and weave. It looks like a lot of discernment and filtering and, protecting your voice and protecting a narrative that you're trying to keep intact and aligned with the spirit and the essence and the tenets and the values of the community. And you're right, sometimes that doesn't really, vibe well or is convenient for any profit motives or anything that seems, or for a funder that might be looking for something that's accessible. So it may not be a straight line or as direct of a trajectory as, a narrative that might be more conventionally made or not have a narrative that's troubling existing and mainstream narratives about the community. But it feels essential to, at least for me and the path I've taken with the features that I'm developing for the film, it's been essential to protect the work and keep it as independent as possible. And that's directed the type of funding that we've gotten for the project. So no studios or production companies, but thankfully there are my Miami residents and citizens who are supportive of the community and thus the work, as well as institutions. Y'all keep mentioning Marshall Davis. He's always been in my corner and supporting the films and the works. Like we did our casting call in Cultural Arts Center. And Moonlight being supportive of the project as well, and not placing. So yes, I think it's essential to, if you know that you're trying to create a narrative that is going to challenge, then challenge some dominant narratives, then I would say to take the care to make sure that you protect it, to keep it intact as you see fit.
Tarell, did you want to weigh in on the funding?
Every time I weigh in on the funding, people only hear one part of it, which is that the film got made for nearly $2 million, and you know what I mean? But whenever I say I wrote the original script in Moonlight, Black Boys Look Blue when I was 23 years old in 2003, and kept pulling the project out of the hands of so many people who wanted to make some weird draft of it, take the gay out of it, make it less this, take the drugs out of it, don't start it with every nigga is a star. There were so many people who, through the years, to the time it took for us to film it, that, absolutely wanted to change what it was. And you have to just hold on. And as Faren is alluding to, it does pay off, but you have to believe in the vision of it. And no, you cannot shoot, Lakeshore Drive as Biscayne Bay. You just can't. It's just not the same. And so yeah, I have no, I sound like a church fan. Hold on, keep the faith in what you're doing. There's no opportunity lost. It just means somebody else picked it up.
It's a sermon. That is a sermon. I want to get to this question. So for everyone here is creating some amazing work for the youth in Liberty City and throughout Miami. How are you making sure that these stories are accessible and shared with them?
So one of the things, so like I said, a lot of the work that my colleagues on this panel are doing is exciting to me, and I keep using that to point at for the young people, the young filmmakers, or I call them the early artists, examples of what can be done and how it can be done. For example, there's a project called Wall In, where we basically went out and talk about this wall that all these kids were doing backflips off of, but didn't know that was a segregation wall. And in fact, we were walking through with Alex Hibbert from Moonlight, and he was like, I don't know what this wall is. I was like, this is a segregation wall. And so, we started a program where we got visual artists, to really look at and reimagine what that wall could be and how it could tell its own history. Other things like we started a program with Marshall Davis, trying to, again, get our young women into authorial roles that sometimes are excluded, and because boys sometimes like to be loud, they jump in front. But our young women are really strong and smart, and oh my God, the work so anyway, we got together, we rewrote Antigone during some of the early days of our Black Lives Matter resurgence. And they just have been those kinds of things, making sure that they know that they do have a platform, right? That they do have ways to talk about what's going on in their city, around them right now, and really just providing a lot of just direct love. And what I mean by that is not like, oh, I love you. No, direct love, like, yo, I love what you're doing. Here's how you can grow it. And actually, I'm going to help you grow it by doing X. And so those things are really important to me.
I just want to shout out the Wallen program, because I had the absolute pleasure of teaching a storytelling class to the youth. And like, my heart, like, these kids are on it, y'all. These kids are on it. And, when people were like, oh, there are no arts. I think someone actually said like Liberty City was an art desert. I heard this out of someone's mouth in Miami. And I laughed in Marshall Davis, right? I laughed in Payback Dance. And I was like, what, these kids, like, in teaching these kids, I'm like, stop it. Just because the Arts Center is not in Liberty City does not make it an arts desert. Like stop playing with people's children. So just, I love the Wallen program, and I love all youth arts programs that like center the voices of young folks in Liberty City, Overtown, Carroll City, Richmond Heights schools, all the places where Black people are. It's beautiful. I think we can squeeze in one last question, and I think one person can answer it, is just reaching on the Mother Vine comment that Faren mentioned. There seems to be an ecology of Black creatives in Miami who are very much invested in supporting other Black creatives, bringing them into projects. Can you talk about that commitment? Who would like to talk about that commitment?
This sounds like a Donette Francis.
It is absolutely a Donette question.
I mean, the short answer is like, yes, Liberty City is not a desert. Miami is not a desert. Miami's Black community, Black artist community is rife and popping, and we love each other. It's so. In terms of how we support each other, like if I'm the one that's on, I want to put somebody else on too. And it's nice to, all be sort of the folks that I collaborate with. I'm thinking about everyone that was part of Liberty, Monica Sorrell, Robert Colomb, and Keisha Ray Witherspoon. These are all amazing filmmakers, directors, and producers in their own right. And And we all met each other again on Moonlight, or maybe the Terrence Nance's another Miami project. So we're passionate. We all sort of, stick together, and it's genuine love, tightness, and camaraderie within the Miami Black creative community.
Thank you for that question, Donette. I love ending on love, and we do love each other. We go hard for one another. We like, how can I help you? I'm gonna show up to your thing. I'm gonna tweet this out, like whatever. Folks show up how they can. They may not have a lot of money to underwrite things, but they will be here in service to you. And so shout out to Black creatives in Miami-Dade, and to everyone on the panel and everyone in the chat and all the folks who are with us watching. Thank you so much. And speaking of love, we love Third Horizon and O Cinema here in Miami. Thank you all so much for making this panel possible. Thank you to Sundance for having us, and we hope to have these conversations going beyond just today, but Black storytelling in Miami-Dade, like let's keep talking about this. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Nadege. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure.